welcome to Crafty Music Tips. I put this solo acoustic guitar piece together just because I wanted to. I love the Beatles, and when I was doing it I thought to myself, I really want to analyze this in a separate video to the one that you're seeing. If you're into nerding out over the nuts and bolts over a song, like the way that I am, well then you'll enjoy this video. But before I get into the composition analysis here, I'll just mention hearing the song for the first time and my initial reaction. Now, I think it's safe to say that there would have been a lot of expectation.
Hello. Yeah, well, I hope you can deliver.
The biggest band in the world, arguably the most influential, is releasing a new song in the 21st century. It's absolutely crazy. And I've heard different versions of, I didn't like it or I expected something happier. And to be honest, I kind of related to that initially. Now, I first saw the 12-minute film, which was released on the Beatles YouTube page, which gives you all of the story that you need really in the lead up to the song being released. And if you haven't seen it, I'll leave a link below. I recommend watching it. Now, before the actual Beatles band version was released, I had to listen to John's initial demo. There was definitely something very profound about hearing the late great John Lennon, before he passed on, playing a song that was just all by himself on a piano, and the recording was very raw. Like me as a kid pressing record on my tape player, like it wasn't very high quality. But what was a high quality was the fact that it was John Lennon. And, he wasn't super warmed up. He was trying to play through the song that wasn't really developed yet. But something about John Lennon, there's a magic to it. So it's safe to say, hearing John's demo, I was pretty pumped. It's exciting thinking, well, that was a really raw recording, and so the full Beatles are going to give us a very polished treatment. Okay, enough preamble. It's time to get into the song analysis now. So I'm going to go through the lyrics, I'm going to go through the chord progression and the melody, a few other little good tidbits as well. But really, if you know me and you know how I like to learn songs and how I like to analyze them, we got to start with the song structure. Okay, so the full band's recent release has two different ways that you could look at the structure. There's the modern pop way, which is an intro, you've got two verses and then a chorus, then another verse, another chorus, a solo, another verse, and then an outro. Or you could see it that you've got an intro and then it's kind of like an A section in the classic style, we'll say like a jazz style. You've got your main melody. And then John, he repeats that section and then goes to a B section. And then you've got another A-B. And then it's like a new section for the solo. So I've called it a C section here. But then there's another A section. And then there's an outro, which is based around the A section. Okay, so with John's original demo version, he had an intro and two verses as well. And then he had a bridge, a completely different section that wasn't in the most recent full band release. And that, sadly for me, upon the first listen of the full band's version, was completely missing.
What's the matter with it?
So I was a little bit annoyed and I felt like, where's that bit that I liked? Now, since doing all of this analysis, I've come to terms with it and I actually really quite like it and I agree with the decision. Initially though, I didn't. Now I'll continue on. So he goes to that chorus, as we know it as the chorus, another verse, and then that bridge again that I initially loved so much. And then he ran out of words, I guess. So he just played the chorus and the verse just on the piano very beautifully. Now, so you could see it as well as, he did his two A sections and then a B section, which I'm calling his bridge the B section, not the chorus as the B section, because the chorus in John's would be the C section. So it's basically got ABC, ABC with an extra A at the start and the end there. So for the rest of this video, anytime you hear me referring to song structure elements, you'll hear me referring to it in this modern way with labeling it with verse, chorus, and so forth. Which brings us to, they change key quite a bit. Now, those of you that know your music theory jargon will know that that's modulation, modulating between different keys. Now, the way that it's structured in the Beatles release is that the intro and the verses are all in A minor, the choruses are in G major, and the solo is interesting, kind of changes between a few different keys within that section. Now, that's a great segue into the next section of this video. Let's talk about the chord progression and how they relate to the key. All right, so I've got a little chord chart that I've whipped up here in good old iReal Pro, and these two sections are both in the key of A minor. You've got a 1 chord, the root chord, which goes to, this is an interesting chord. I've heard people describe it as a G6. I've also heard people describe it as an E minor over G. Now, either way, who cares? They're very similar, and it's got that same kind of feel. Either it feels like it's going to the flat 7th or the 7th of the key, or it's kind of like a 5 chord in the natural minor, but a first inversion. Either way, it's an interesting chord because it's not a super stock standard chord. And that's one of the beautiful things about the Beatles. You know, the Beatles have this wonderful thing. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, more in depth, but they've got this wonderful way of making something that sounds simple actually be not so simple. It's kind of complicated, or it's clever. So anyway, so yeah, that one chord I just found to be quite interesting, and I really enjoyed it.
Interesting.
Now, the rest is pretty kind of stock standard, I guess. You got an A minor that goes to the F major 7. I guess the fact that it's an F major 7 is really nice, a 4-note chord, and not a stock standard triad of just F major by itself. It's kind of cool. But then, actually, if you think about it, you've got an E major here. But hang on, we were just doing some sort of E minor flavors just before. Yeah, so I guess what this is doing, it's kind of borrowing either from the harmonic minor or the melodic minor version of A minor, rather than the Aeolian or natural minor that A minor was based around leading up to that moment. That happens a lot in music. The 5 chord of a minor will then become a major as opposed to being a minor, or a dominant 7, which has a major 3rd in it. Now, when you get to here, I love this A sus4, because if you think about it, you know, what's sus short for?
Nothing sus.
It's the word suspended. And so you're suspending that feeling of, it hasn't resolved yet, and then it resolves to the minor. And when you hear the chords just by themselves, when you get to that sus4 chord, you almost wonder, is it going to go to a major? It doesn't in this case, but it so could have. And then our next key is the chorus, G major. When it goes to the G, it really does feel like, we're in a new key now. And if you think about it, it's a 1 to a 3. And then you've got from the 3, a 3, 6, 2, 5. That's classic. That's absolute classic chord progression stuff right there. In a diatonic key, 147362251 is the phone number, as my teacher from music school used to refer to it as, that you needed to remember, because you will see either portions of that or the full amount of numbers of the chords within that key following those chord numbers. So as a result, I hear this and feel this, that it goes to the key of G major. And then, so you've got a 2-5 here, which is in the key of G, but then it goes to an A minor when it goes to the next verse. So you could say that somewhere around here, it sort of changes back to A minor. I guess when you are changing keys, if you're changing between keys that are extremely similar with the chords that are being used in the two keys, it is just ambiguous for when it actually does change. Now, it's a great maneuver at the end of the second chorus. This A minor to D here goes straight to the solo. Now, the D minor chord is not in the key of G major, so it's definitely changed key. D minor is in the key of A minor. It's the 4 chord, but it's going from a D minor to a C. So to me, it feels more like it's going from a 2 chord to a 1 chord. It's getting back home here to its home base.
There's no place like home.
And that happens twice with the repeat here. And then for the third line, you've got an E minor to an A minor, which we heard before in the chorus. So you could say that it's either A minor or G major. You could say that it actually hasn't changed key yet, because if we're in the key of C here, well, an E minor and an A minor also exists in the key of C major. It's a 3-6. And so if that's the case, we've got a 3-6-2. That's interesting, except the 2 is not minor, which it should be. So we've changed key again. I kind of feel like that it's gone to the key of G major. It'd be like a 5 chord in the key of G major. But then, of course, the Beatles, once again, ever so clever, put us off the scent and give us a D minor straight afterwards. So there's a few ways of thinking of it like that. You could say that, okay, well, I guess here it's kind of like a 2-5 movement in the key of C major. Okay, so going to the second page of my iReal chart here, we'll see that we've got a verse out. So that's the same as it was before. Here's a really cool thing. I'm assuming this is a Paul McCartney maneuver. When they get to the A sus4, where it usually resolves to the A minor, they actually kind of sort of do an overlap. They start the next section while they're ending the verse section. It goes into that cool little outro instrumental with the... So they've got a 1-7-5 with the 5 major here, which really makes it feel like it wants to go back to the 1 and resolve. And it's great. They've got 3 bars with 3 chords, and then they do that again, and then, check it out, they've got 1-3-4 bar, and then 3 chords over 3-8. I guess you could argue, well, it doesn't actually technically go to 3-8, it could just all stay in 3-4, but the emphasis definitely is like as if it does go to 3-8. That's how I feel that it is, 3-8. And then we end on the A minor, the 1 chord.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, so I just want to expand on the fact that they do have time signature changes. Yes, the whole song is in 4/4, but the fact that the song has a pretty cool little groovy time signature shift just at the end is one of those great examples of how the Beatles make something kind of complex, but it doesn't sound that hard, and it's not that crazy. It's only just a little bit of some time signature changes. But if you read that and then have to then start calculating, you'll realize like, oh, okay, right. So, oh, well, I'm not in 4/4 anymore. All of a sudden, it really stimulates a different part of the brain. And the Beatles, yet again, have managed to do it in their wonderful way where it doesn't really sound too full on, but you got to admit, it's pretty clever. All right, so now let's check out the melody of this song. Now, in the classic John Lennon fashion, even years after he's passed away, he's now left the world with yet another fantastic melody that just gets stuck into your head.
You're never gonna get this song out of your head, out of your head, out of your head.
It sounds really catchy and it's really simple in a way, but it's clever. It made me go, oh, is that what he's doing? Right, on a few occasions. So let's just look at this. I've highlighted the fact that the rest here happens on beat 1 and then the first melodic note starts on beat 2. Now, good suggestion to melody writers out there, try not starting on beat 1. It's not that crazy and far out, but it definitely does help add a little bit of rhythmical interest. And so speaking of rhythm, John's got some great variations of his melody. He doesn't sing it exactly the same way each time, which adds interest as well. And if you look at it, he's always starting on beat 2. Every phrase, da 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 da, and then here, da 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 da, and da 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 da. So the fact that he's doing something the same each time does give it that hook and that familiarity and the potential of it having it being stuck into your head. But it's not starting on beat 1, so it's interesting.
Interesting.
And by the time that you've heard it 3 times, you're starting to go, okay, I know where this is going. But then, of course, the phrase changes. Now, let's just have a look at how these notes relate to the chord. Why? Well, what you're doing is you're putting icing on a cake. What's the icing? The single notes. What's the cake? The cake is the chord that's underneath. But really, make it simple. What melodic note is connecting with the chord underneath? All right? And so the Beatles do such a great job. John Lennon, by writing this melody initially, knew that by going from a 5 to a 4, I find that actually really interesting personally because he doesn't only hit chord tones. The chord tones are the 5th here, the 5th of the A minor chord. But then he's hanging on to this 4 for a while. And he knows that doing that in a minor chord works actually really well. So then he goes to the 2nd, which doesn't last very long because it goes straight to a different chord. And so this chord, the 2nd, is actually the 5th of an E minor or the 3rd of a G, depending on how you feel that this chord actually exists in the song. And then so that occurs again. But then when you get to this chord here, it's actually the 5th and the 7th of an F major 7 chord. Now, I think it's great as well, just say that John, he hangs on that 9th there. It's great because a 9th or a 2nd, is very common with a feeling of suspension. Suspension meaning it's kind of like you're suspended in air. And so he's singing the 9th or the 2nd whilst the chord underneath it is a sus4. So you've got the root and the 5th of the chord, but then also have both of the possible suspended notes because you can have a sus2 or a sus4 chords. And John Lennon gives you all of them at the same time with the chord and the melody. Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Now, the melody of this second verse is much the same. It does do that different ending like what I mentioned before, but here, this E bar, where he goes, ah, he's singing the notes of an A minor scale from the 5th all the way down with a really cool rhythm. But then he gets to the G sharp. Now, G sharp is not in the key of A natural minor. It is, however, in the key of either A harmonic minor or melodic minor. So it suits ever so well with an E major chord, because that is the note that makes an E chord an E major. If it was a G natural, it would be an E minor. Okay, so moving on to the chorus, the melody is really nice, really simple. All right, now, how do they all relate to their particular chord that's underneath it? You've got 1, 2, 1. If you relate it to G major, so you've got a 2, 5 there. Here, this D note is actually the third of B minor. And then you've got flat 7 root, flat 7, 6. Da, 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 da. Which then goes straight to the third of E minor. And then it's the fourth back to the third. And these 2 fourths that occur here, I would say that he did that because it's going into the A minor, which is the root of A minor. And so you've got 1, 2, 1, 2. Now, that, if you look at it, is really similar to the first bar. You've got 1, 2, 1 there. And so here you've got root 5, 5. This 1, 2, 1, 2 is the same as this bar here. Now, this bar is slightly different. It does start on the root, but then it's actually 6, 6, 7, 6, 5. And it's the flat 7th of D. So it's implying that it's a dominant. Fantastic stuff, John Lennon. When we get to the second chorus, they've given us a surprise in that the chorus doesn't last in exactly the same amount of bars and lyrics because they cut it slightly shorter than the first chorus. Want you to be there for me. It doesn't do that second repeat of those 2 chords and that melody with the cool variation, sadly, but hey, it's in the first chorus. And then we go straight to the solo, which is in a different key. Now, so this solo that Paul McCartney did on slide guitar as a tribute to the late, great George Harrison is quite simple, but I guess the fact that the chords and the keys change during it means that he knows that I've got some really great chords underneath. I don't need to get too fancy. The notes that he chooses are very fitting. Okay, so then our last verse, very similar, but here, this outro, which kind of starts here, kind of starts there. You've got the da 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 da. So he's borrowing the melody of John's, assuming that this was Paul that crafted this outro section. So that works. Da 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 ba. But then it's definitely a root position G chord here, which then goes to an E, but he's playing a D note, which is the flat 7th, which makes it, when you put it all together, it makes it an E dominant 7 chord. And then, so that repeats again for these 3 bars. And then you've just got da 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 ba 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 ba. So what we've got here is over the G, we've got a third. And then when it gets to an F chord, you've got yet again a third. And then when you get to the E chord, yet again, you've got a third. And then ends on the root, like a good full stop end of a sentence should. All right, so there you go. So that's the melody. I think it's a fantastic melody, and I think that, it's not that complex. It's not breaking any new ground, essentially, but it's just good. Why? Because of its rhythmical structure as well as its melodic structure, but also for the fact that we've got some really interesting chords underneath.
Sounds good.
All right, so it would be criminal to do an intense song analysis and not look at the lyrics that John Lennon so excellently crafted. So I know it's true. It's all because of you. And if I make it through, it's all because of you. Okay, so one might argue that those lyrics aren't super profound or super enlightening, but I think John Lennon, he had a knack, as well as Paul McCartney, of being schmaltzy, yet not super cheesy, where it's like a bit of a throwaway. And so why is that? I believe that it lies within the melody. As I mentioned before, it's got some really good rhythmical interest to it, as well as how those notes connect with their chords, and the fact that the chords are interesting. So he could almost sing just anything. But just to look at the words away from any connection to the music and the melody, the fact that he's got "It's All Because of You" twice, I think it's great. It's a hook already. If you think about it, the fact that he's giving us something that we can really latch onto there earlier on is really good. So then you've got "And Now and Then." I think it's great that, he started with the song title. I think that it's, I guess in a way I do love song titles that don't appear in the lyrics as well. But I just like that he's gone, there's the song title. So to continue on, "And now and then, if we must start again, well, we will know for sure that I will love you." So makes you wonder, okay, so is he singing about Yoko? Or is he singing about Paul? Or is he talking about, this huge amount of flowing love that he always seemed to have pouring out in his songs? We won't know, but it's a really lovely sentiment. It's simple, but it's lovely. And then so our chorus, "Now and then, I miss you. Oh, now and then, I want you to be there for me, always to return to me." Yeah, it's something that I would assume that, if he was still alive, you would go, okay, yeah, that's nice. But the organic nature of which the song came to fruition, the fact that there was an old demo lying around that the rest of the surviving Beatles have worked on, it's a very transcending type of lyric there. I want you to be there for me, always to return to me. You can get actually pretty deep with that. I really, really like it. And then so he's going, "I know it's true." Now, that's repeating the first lyric of the first verse, but then he doesn't finish off the same verse exactly the same. He does say, "It's all because of you," but then, "And if you go away, I'll know you never stay." So John Lennon, he's doing yet another good Beatles thing, which is you think that the song's, it's got some certain meaning, and then all of a sudden they'll add in a new element. So I love it. It's fantastic. And then we got another chorus, and then we've got the same first verse repeated. Now, I'm a sucker for a hook. The fact that they've just repeated the first verse just to drum that point home, I love it. And I love that there's a potential message for us as fans of the Beatles. That maybe, who knows, maybe he's singing to his fans. Look at that verse from that perspective. "I know it's true. It's all because of you. And if I make it through, it's all because of you." He's thanking us in a way, if that is the intended meaning. I'm probably way off. I can't help myself as a Beatles fan. And let's face it, all of our favorite artists, we all secretly think that they're singing to just us. And yeah, it's a fantastic song. It's a fantastic sentiment. In its simplicity, it has its set of surprises and its set of good quality Beatles magic. So, having analysed all of these different elements, it's pretty clear to me that I'm very connected to the Beatles. And why is that? Well, for one thing, I'm putting all of my effort into putting this together, but that's just because I want to. I did it for myself, and then I figured, well, why don't I just share it with you, fellow Beatles fan? And yeah, so there's one thing that's really apparent that I really connect to is the Beatles' maturity. You know, the fact that Paul McCartney was able to confidently make the executive decision to just ditch a full section from John Lennon's original demo. You know, initially, like I said, I was like, it's my favorite bit. But I agree with his decision that, look, yes, it was good, but it was probably taking away from the fundamental elements that John had put together. And, you know, the verse and the chorus that John Lennon had, when you take away that bridge, you know, they really do fit together very well and stand on their own 2 feet. In addition to that, I have mentioned a lot about the Beatles. It almost sounds like that they're easy to play, easy to sing elements. And then, of course, sooner or later, always happens with a Beatles song, when you really get into it and you go, oh, I'm going to sing this or play this or learn this. You go, wait a minute. That's actually either really clever or really complex. It's maybe not the most complex thing ever, but it's not necessarily what you thought. And the great guitarist from the band Extreme, Nuno Bettencourt, he uses a word, it's called simplexity. He said, I don't know if there's a better word that I can use from the English language where you've got both of those elements at play, where something's simple, but it's also complex. And so the Beatles, in this song, they definitely give you a good element of simplexity. Also, the fact that John's lyric is multi-meaning, that you can read into it a number of different ways, I think is fantastic. And also, you know, what a great bookend to arguably the greatest ever career of a band or an artist. And as cheesy as it'll sound, I want to thank from the bottom of my heart John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr, as well as Giles Martin, Sir George, everyone that was involved in putting this together. You know, without them doing it, I wouldn't be here talking about it. You wouldn't be here listening to it. So it was an absolute pleasure for me to do every step of the way, to listen to it and have them challenge me and also give me all of these discoveries. I hope you got some discoveries out of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave me a comment below in the comments section. And also, there is a bunch of other crafty music tips, different videos here on this Crafty Music Tips YouTube channel that I hope you will find helpful as well. Go check out 1 or 10 that may be of help to you where you feel necessary. Now, before I get out of here, the thing I'll say is that with that acoustic solo arrangement that I did of now and then, I'm actually going to notate it and put it inside the Crafty Guitar Club. It's a way that you can be able to get access to that, a bunch of heaps of other things like what I've talked about in this particular video, and many more. And also a chance to hang out with other like-minded guitarists like yourself if you play guitar. So if you want to know more about how you can access that, go to craftyguitarclub.com. So that's it from me. I'll see you in another Crafty Music Tips video here on YouTube very soon. Whatever you're doing, I hope it's rocking. Stay Beatlesy.